Time to look back at the biggest stories this week. And today we will do that in the company of two people. First of all, the Labour peer, Baroness Diane Hayter. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
And also with the Conservative peer, Lord Bethell. Good afternoon.
Asma, good afternoon.
Now we've got quite a few topics to get through. So let's start, shall we? Of course, with what happened in Southport. What should have been a fun summer holiday event for children descended into horror when a knife attack interrupted a Taylor Swift-themed dance workshop. 3 children were killed. We know that now. 9 others injured. 6 left in critical condition. What followed was a week of violent rioting and clashes with the police due to disinformation spread online by far-right mobs. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, announced a new approach to policing violent disorder at a press conference yesterday.
I can announce today that following this meeting, we will establish a national capability across police forces to tackle violent disorder, shared intelligence, wider deployment of facial recognition technology, and preventative action, criminal behaviour orders to restrict their movements before they can even board a train, in just the same way that we do with football hooligans.
That was Keir Starmer. Lord Bethell, do you think that Keir Starmer got that tone right? Because it sounds very, we're going to protect the country, which is what you want to hear. However, there are many people getting in touch saying, well, it's not fair to say that everyone who agrees necessarily with these people are far right. So do you think he got it right?
Yeah, listen, I think you're right that he's taking it very seriously. He has a nice manner. He's very authoritative because the law is his background. But there will be, as you say, plenty of people in the country who worry about this 2-tier policing question. Not that I support that thought, I think they're wrong, but he is playing into that fear that people think that maybe people who are worried about immigration are treated differently than people, for instance, who are worried about what's happening in Gaza. And that's the knife edge that we've got to play. Now, it's wrong, I think, for him to suggest that none of these ideas have ever been considered. I mean, I think there has been a huge amount of work by the police authorities on trying to figure out the right tactics. But getting that balance right between people who riot on different subjects to make sure that one crew are not in any way given the feeling that they are being hit harder than another crew is absolutely essential. And I'm not quite sure if he's walking that line.
Diane, what do you make of what he said?
I think he used one word which was really important, and that's he used the word hooligans. We're not talking about ordinary protesters. We're not talking about people with worries, whether it's about immigration or anything else. We're talking about hooligans. And in fact, James just used the word riots or rioters. Well, I think all rioters need to be brought to book, whether they're from the right, the left, the old, the young, or whatever. So this isn't about protest. This is about protest that becomes damage either to property, to people, or even to the sense of security and safety on a street. I mean, you used the word, and I'm not being critical, that 3 children were killed. Actually, it was 3 girls that were killed. And the people that I saw on the TV screens rioting were men. There's a very aggressive, I'm really sorry, but, maleness to this behavior. And it threatens all women on the streets who may want to go and protest quite legitimately about all sorts of issues if there's any risk that some of these men will then turn it more into a riot. And so I think Keir's words of hooligan was absolutely right.
James Bethell, what do you think can be done to stop this from escalating? Nigel Farage said, I don't support street violence. However, he kind of said you haven't seen anything yet. He said that what we've seen over the last the last week could be much, much worse. So how do we, all of us, the media, the far-right people on social media, the politicians, how do we stop this from escalating?
Well, there are 2 things that strike me. One is, I think overall, we've become very tolerant of violence. Dan is right to single out the difference between people legitimately protesting and quietly protesting and people who start throwing bricks and attacking the police. I've seen it in Westminster on our doorstep. Too often, people have been allowed to escalate legitimate protest and turn it into violence and intimidation. We saw it during the election as well. And I speak now of people on all sorts of causes, ones I agree with and disagree with. The principle that intimidation and violence should not be part of protest simply hasn't been applied either equitably or really at all. And I think we've allowed that to slip. And it's very difficult to now put the genie back in the bottle with this particular riot when the precedent has been set elsewhere. So I think overall, violence has to be cracked down on much more. And then secondly, on this misinformation point, I am really frustrated that the judges moved so slowly to lift the coverage orders that prevented the identification of this person, because it allowed Nigel Farage and others to stir the pot and create problems. And in all sorts of these protests that become violence issues, misinformation has been badly handled, and people who have concerns and grievances and worries have been stoked up by miscreants, often foreign actors, as well as our own bloody-minded people. And so we need to work much harder on knocking those false rumours on the head earlier.
Okay, that's an interesting point. We're going to move on. But before we do, I want to read out this text, the WhatsApp that came in from Carl. I served my country for almost 26 years, 2 tours of Iraq, 1 of Afghanistan. I've had workmates of all creeds, colours and denominations. I would class myself as a fairly balanced, decent human being because I don't want hundreds of thousands of unvetted, mostly young, male, illegal immigrants, and that is what they are, no matter what the current government decides to call them. I am far right. Because it upsets me that billions of pounds are spent on illegal immigrants, yet pensioners are losing winter fuel allowance, the NHS is overrun, true crime information is suppressed, a certain religion gets an easy ride in the eyes of the law. I am far right. Because I think that Nigel Farage speaks a lot of sense. I am far right. When I escorted an 86-year-old Chinese lady to her front door because she was a bit confused, I didn't feel like a far right thug. So my message to the anti-Farage rhetoric radio station is that you are out of touch with the bulk of the British people. So that's something for us all to chew on, perhaps. We're going to move on now because we've got a lot to get through to talk about Huw Edwards. Since Huw Edwards admitted possessing indecent images of children on Wednesday, the BBC has faced questions about why he continued to be employed and why he was paid more than £200,000 following his arrest in November. The corporation is also under pressure to explain whether it was aware of any other allegations against one of its biggest stars. The Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, said the BBC chose not to sack Edwards in case he was not charged.
Quite simply, the police came to us and said, look, we need to do our work in total confidence. We've arrested. Please keep this confidential. And at that point, I think the principle is clear in my mind. And I say we thought long and hard about this. This wasn't a knee-jerk decision, and it was difficult. But when the police, and I put, if you think about this in terms of precedent, people do get arrested, and then we've had situations where no charges and there's nothing there to be followed up on. In this case, we knew it was serious. We knew no specifics, by the way, apart from the category of the potential offences.
Diane, what do you make of what Tim Davie said there about the timeline, really, and what they felt they could and could not do?
It seems to me they were rather unimaginative. I mean, I hope that they did deal, if not directly, with Huw Edwards, but at least with his representatives. And there were ways of dealing with this. You know, the salary could have been put in an escrow account. There could have been ways of saying, you know, we need to make sure that whatever happens in the future, if he is to be found innocent, he could then get it, but the money could be put to one side, an escrow account. So there were, I think, more imaginative ways of dealing with this. The BBC seems to have not been as flexible and not thought enough about what this looked like. There's, you know, the issue of whether Huw Edwards really is remorseful about it. I mean, I think if his people started offering to put some money into the, you know, help victims of sexual abuse or something like that, it would begin to show that he also felt some obligations, if you like, as someone who has been such a touchstone for the BBC, that something he's done has let down the BBC. And we don't seem to be seeing any of that. And I think that this has not been handled in a way that really helps the public continue to have confidence in what is a very, very important British institution, the BBC.
Yeah, James, what do you think of how the BBC's handled it? I also just want to generally refer to a piece in the Times today. It's a thunderer written by someone anonymous at the BBC under the name of Jane Wood. That's not her real name. BBC staff are afraid to blow the whistle on talent like Huw Edwards, basically saying that it makes your life too difficult. They don't get back to you for a long time, and then you're not offered work on a particular programme. So what do you think of what the BBC has done so far?
Yeah, I think that's the point in the Thunder. I mean, Diane, I've been an employer. I've faced some very difficult situations. Employment law does tie your hands. It's really difficult, the escrow account and the creativity. Whilst one would wish it was so, you are in a difficult position. But Tim Daly, my goodness, how did it ever get to this? Because it's quite clear this specific incident has been going on for years and years and years. There's suggestions that he was propositioning members of the team, which is completely wrong. And this did not come out of nowhere. So why did the BBC think it was so important to preserve this person's career over all other considerations and allow it to get all the way to the guy being charged and admitting guilt before they actually start pulling the plug on it? It should have been tackled much, much earlier. Listen, in any business, I've been in it, whether you're in finance, media, entertainment, politics, whatever, there's always a tendency to try to give the big celebrities and the big crown jewels space and forgiveness and what have you. That is wrong. It's been wrong for ages. It's so clearly wrong. And I'm really disappointed that the BBC, for all of their governance and investment in systems and best practices and what have you, have fallen for the most obvious mistake yet again. It's Jimmy Savile. Jeremy Clarkson was different, I know, but they made a mess of that as well. Yet again, they are making a mess of their celebrity handling, and there have been innocent people who paid a big price for this, I think.
We are going to talk about Rachel Reeves now, because this week was Rachel Reeves' first big moment as Chancellor of the Exchequer. She announced a number of measures she said that were needed to cope with this unprecedented state of finances left by the Conservatives. Stopping winter fuel payments for those not on pension credits or benefits was one such policy that got a reaction from the House.
Today, I am making the difficult decision that those not in receipt of pension credit or certain other means-tested benefits will no longer receive the winter fuel payment from this year onwards. The Government will continue to provide winter fuel payments worth £200 to households receiving pension credit, or £300 to households in receipt of pension credit with someone over the age of 80. Let me be clear, this is not a decision I wanted to make, nor is it the one that I expected to make. But these are the necessary and urgent decisions that I must make.
Diane Hayter, it's not, you know yourself, this has not gone down well, this decision. Is it enough to say, well, I had to do it?
Well, I think that it is taken in the round. I mean, we've talked about this affecting older people. And of course, what older people also need is a health service where they can get to see their GP, where they can get a hospital appointment. And when they can, they can't afford to wait for medicine their age or medical treatment. They need it now. So I think if you balance, and I'm not saying they should pay for it, but if you balance what she's doing in making sure that the doctors and hospitals are being offered money so they won't be going on strike, so that the older people who, after all, use the health service much more than younger people can get better treatment there. I wouldn't be surprised if, when we ask old people what they feel about this, given that they've got some months before the winter comes in, so they've got a bit of warning about it, that they will think that the balance, that they should have a health service where they can see GPs, they can get into hospital, they'll think, actually, that's fair. So it is a difficult decision, and it will. But there will be a lot of people who will not feel the pinch, who can afford the heating, and the judgment to help doctors be able to work without striking, I think, is really important for older people.
Oh, okay. I mean, clearly we've had, all sorts of people getting in touch with us who are elderly, who don't quite qualify anymore and who are very angry. Views across the board will change. James Bethel, What did you make of what Rachel Reeves said? I mean, the numbers are there, and there were quite a lot of overspends. So she had to do it, didn't she?
Well, I would say that she should have done it. This has been around for a long time. I do remember when, during the winters, pensioners were hard pressed, and the death rates amongst pensioners would go up in a way that really made you feel depressed and worried for them. Since then, in the last 15 years, the provisions for a lot of pensioners have gone up. There are edge cases, and I'm sorry for that. But on the whole, we've done well by pensioners, both in their welfare benefits and their pension arrangements. And the idea of wealthy pensioners being given an extra supplement, it hasn't made sense for a long time. So I think hats off to Rachel Reeves for grabbing the nettle at this point. I hope that this government will do the same with quite a few of these knotty policy problems that should have been dealt with previously, and all power to her elbow.
Do you think, James Bethell, that she should have called Jeremy Hunt a liar?
I don't like people calling each other a liar, particularly in politics. No, it's wrong, and it escalates things. It diminishes trust. Have you met Jeremy Hunt? I mean, he's not a liar. I mean, come on. Any more than Rachel Reeves is a liar. I think that's petty, and I hope that's not how she's going to continue.
Diane, what did you make of that whole exchange?
Well, come on. He went for her pretty quickly when she sat down. So I think he's big enough, and I was going to say big enough and ugly enough. He's not ugly, but to look after himself.
He's not ugly. He'll be happy to hear that.
No, he's definitely not ugly. You're wonderful, Jeremy.
But it's a serious point, though, here in terms of language. I mean, probably shouldn't be calling each other liars, should we?
No, I mean, I don't. But if she'd used a euphemism, about misleading, we all sort of understood what it meant. So maybe yes, keep to the euphemisms. But I think what she was saying was that he was being less than candid in his response. I think that's fair enough for her to say.